Good morning, good afternoon, good night for some of you. Welcome to the last day of the Life in Kyrgyzstan conference, which is sixth time this year. My name is Damir Esenaliev. I'm senior researcher at two institutions, IGZ and ISDC, and I've been part of the LiK Study since its beginning. So today we are going to have more or less interactive event. It's called LiK Data Users Workshop. And we hope it's an opportunity, conversation we want to have to get your feedback, to understand your needs, and then hopefully also get support from you. Today, in terms of presentations, we will have two of them. One is from me about new wave 2019. It's also the sixth wave of the data. And it is to get to know you, what was changed, what was the sample size, what happened largely, and probably respond to your questions when you can get the data. So that's the idea. Second part is by Golib Sanaev from IAMO, and he will present himself as well a little bit more. But he recently presented us his approach of merging LiK data at community level with climate data from Google Earth and this type of platforms. And hopefully it's going to be useful for you as well to see how this data, LiK, can be combined with third-party data. And then the second half, we hope it's enough time to have a conversation. We want to be it as interactive as possible. I try to suggest kind of talking points, say data documentation, any other points you think relevant, but also maybe discuss about more or less regular engagement with LiK community, let me call it that way, in terms of thinking, maybe organizing a seminar series, which provides more time and is more or less academic oriented. So people have enough time to present, get substantial feedback. That's the idea we are discussing among the organizations that now lead the LiK study. So that's one idea we would like to discuss with you and get your feedback. Once again, thank you for joining. Just to say that now everyone has access to microphone and you can talk. I'm not sure whether it makes sense for me to present first and ask questions, or can be that it is that you can ask some clarifying quick questions that can be important, yeah, but maybe your question will be responded in later slides. So in that respect, maybe it makes sense to go till end and then ask questions. So if everyone is happy with the suggestion, I can start with proceeding with the presentation. It's a bit how to say, inconvenient for me because I don't see you and I don't get any feedback. So it feels like talking to yourself very seriously. Okay, let me open my slides and get started. So let me start with a slide named "What's New in the 2019 Wave." But let me start with generally presenting the study, because I assume there are people who are new to the study and would like to know more. Definitely, if you look for information, it's you can find it, but also giving kind of big features would be probably useful. So I'm going to present largely how we do it, but then also second part will be to show the 2019 wave. Okay. A moment. So what's a Life in Kyrgyzstan study? Yeah, so it's a academic-led, research-based, multi-topic, longitudinal survey of households and individuals in Kyrgyzstan. It tracks the same 8,000 individuals from initial 3,000 households over time from all regions in the country. Data collected at community, household, and individual levels on many topics. And some of them are listed here: demographics, assets, employment, agriculture, shocks, social networks, happiness, and other topics. So data was collected 6 times so far, and it started in 2010. We had different stages when one group of institutions collected, say, first 3 waves. Then we had another consortium of partners that collected the 4th wave, and etc. So just to mention that definitely funding is not that it comes easily. So we have to raise funding, and it's good that we were able to raise funds to keep collecting the data, but definitely there is a point when we have to think about more or less a sustainable funding source, which I can tell a little bit more what we are thinking about it. Now, the kind of feature of the study is that it's panel, yeah? So panel meaning that people who are in the sample for the first time hopefully will stay with us forever. As Stillman likes saying, they can either run from us or die. Yeah? So that's kind of gives a sense of what the longitudinal or panel study, that we would like to see the whole life cycle of an individual. So like from the birth till death. But and given it's been since 2010, we cannot really claim that, but the longest longitudinal studies can track people for a very big part of their lives. So one feature to make a note that it's not a panel of households, but individuals. So households come to the study because an individual who was part of the study in the past became a part of, say, a new household. So new households join because somebody from the other household in the past, old household, joined to this household. So all members of that new household now will become a sample in our study. So it means that in case of in-country, within-country mobility, we can still trace, and if they agree and happy to continue with the study, they will participate. But given Kyrgyzstan is a country where topic of migration is a big, it definitely affects our study. People just move sometimes with the whole families outside, and it's a case when we cannot track them. Yeah, definitely could be a very interesting extension to find them outside of the country and try to see what happened to them, but it's probably a separate project. So just to say that how this panel is maintained, that new households which are part of, to which a previous person joined will become a new household in our sample, and then panel sample may have a potential to expand, but it's not usually a case. Now, moving to the sample, just to say that initial sampling was done in such a way to more or less proportionally mirror population size in each oblast or region in Kyrgyzstan. And the initial sample was based on population census conducted in 2009. So it was based on stratified random 2-stage sampling. Most households coming from rural areas, just to reflect that most population seems to be living in rural areas. So I'm a bit doubtful about the kind of that we keep saying it's 2/3 of population still living in rural areas. I think within country mobility is enough high. People moving to cities to work, I think, in winter time. So data is national representative, but not at oblast level. Yeah, so we don't have enough observations to claim so, but definitely we can claim rural and urban division and north-south. Moving further, here this table shows the sample dynamics. So you can see what's happening with the sample at different levels. So major one is definitely household level, where we started with 3,000, but over time it was quite expected that sample will be declining because of attrition for reasons I just told. People migrate, people move, we cannot find them, people refuse to participate. So these are the reasons why the sample of the panel will decline. And definitely huge efforts needed to maintain this panel and make sure that people are happy and continue providing information. So in 2019, there were some changes which led to better tracking. So we have now more communities joining the sample, but again, it's probably 1-2 cases per village. Yeah. So in that respect, it's a question how you kind of weight those data, etc. On agriculture, you notice that it started 2016, and then in 2019, it was because donors or partners of the study wanted to see more at agriculture. At individual level, just to make a note, it's adults, so everyone aged 18 and older are part of this number, but definitely we have children in households which do not respond individually. So in that respect, we do not count them and don't show them, but largely 3,000 household translates to about 13,000 individuals. Yeah. So when a child becomes 18 years old, he or she becomes a part of the individual survey. And now you see that the youth is part of the study. It was a special project from University of Central Asia to see nationwide kind of information about youth, what they do, what they think. So it was in the last wave a special module added, and let's see whether we will continue asking youth questions. Moving on, how we develop questionnaires. Those of you who use the data and in the conference when presenting, you saying this information was not a part of the studies and it became a part, so I can use only 2 ways, but not the previous 2 ways. This type of information and reflection how we develop the questionnaires. So definitely try to be broad in terms of consultations. We try to be relevant. We try to be innovative in some sense. So we make a joke about a toy module, toy meaning festivities, toys in Kyrgyz language. But it also rhymes with toy games like in English. So that was something we discussed a lot, but introduced and seems to be quite popular, being used in analysis people do. We started very basic with paper-based questionnaires in 2010 and then continued till 2016. But given that technology becoming cheaper and gives some benefits, we moved in 2019 to tablet-based data collection copy. Yeah. So interviews are in 2 languages, Kyrgyz and Russian. These are 2 most languages spoken. As I said, we keep core modules, so to give you a consistency across time. And there are special modules which are added, but given there is no big change over time across these areas, we drop them next time. So the idea is that you kind of keep core modules over time, but bring some questions of interest, remove them so that time for interviews is more or less tolerable by respondents. So in 2016, as you already saw, we included agricultural questionnaire, which was quite extensive one. And in 2019, youth questionnaire came into part of the study. Now, probably not too long to stay in the slide. It's just to show what type of topics are at different levels. So at household, it's very typical ask about demographics, about children, housing, assets, income, expenditures, and migration. So definitely certain questions you can ask at household level, and certain questions you can ask only at individual level, where we ask about happiness, education, health, labor market movements. Definitely what we highlight that LiK is a study where you get a lot of information at individual level, yeah. And given we collect data from all adults in a family, the probably most suitable type of analysis to be done is like looking at within households what happens. So there were several papers presented in this conference, and we are happy this type of information is being used. Community is more or less to give you kind of broader coverage in terms of community characteristics. Moving on, fieldworks. Usually we do in fall, in autumn. In the first 3 waves, it was more or less around October, November. Definitely, Kyrgyzstan is a very politically active country, illustrated by recent events. But given elections also take place in autumn, we had to navigate kind of doing before, after. And in last 3 waves, we unfortunately, because of many reasons, kind of collected data mostly in winter times. Yeah, so it was December, January, last wave even went to February. So it's not that we collect data, but we have a private survey company to collect data. It was for long term, it's a company called Sotseconic, 2010 and 13, as well in 2016. Last wave was done by a company called CR Consulting, which is also one of the longest existing company in Kyrgyzstan. And they have to hire definitely a big number of people, enumerators. They usually say it's about 120, could be less, supervised by field supervisors. But again, it depends on type of data collection. So this copy, we realized it's not necessarily that we need field supervisors, because data come right away to the server, and there is could be kind of desk supervisors who can check the data, and maybe some fixes needed to be done. So workload, we say per enumerator about 25 households. It doesn't mean 25 interviews. It probably means much more. So fieldworks last 2-3 months, and you see it's very female-dominated industry in terms of both probably respondents and interviewers in these pictures. Moving on, we are proud that we provide public good with LiK. It's accessible for free for non-commercial use, and most of you probably got the data from this website. It is from IZA, Institute for Study of Labor, and this institute was funded through DFID, the fourth wave of the study, and they had data platform, and we suggested why we don't store the data there, and it's where you're now getting the data. And we're happy to report that over time we see quite active use of the data. The last calculations show it's about 100 institutions worldwide, universities and development institutions, students taking data for replication purposes. Lately, what we see, we also built a lot of capacity building and activities. Conference is one thing, so hopefully it's something that brings people and information. We conducted 3 summer schools in 2014, 15, and 17 in Issyk Lake in summer on labor markets, impact evaluation methods, and social cohesion. Some of you here taught, but also participated in those summer schools. So it creates a community of researchers, and we're happy to see each other again. A couple of research and data workshops in Berlin as well as in Bishkek. So as I already told, LiK is probably unique in landscape of data sources in Kyrgyzstan and in Central Asia, that it provides individual level data, and probably the most advantage is conducting so-called intra-household issues. Yeah, so there are definitely weak parts. For example, we cannot really probably say that consumption part is strong one, because this consumption you better ask more food and non-food items, and ask around the year, not once per year. So in that respect, we provide the data. We understand that it's not perfect, but this is what you get as an indication of households' income level. And Golib is going to present in next speech about combination of the LiK data with other sources of data. Yeah, so for example, geocoded, climatic, administrative data sources, probably one option, but also merging and comparing this data with other household surveys. In Kyrgyzstan, we have KHS, Kyrgyz Integrated Household Survey, which we also try to use, at least compare the same type of information over time. Very often we find good correlation, good rhymes, and it seems to be LiK data quality seems to be okay along with when compared to other sources of data. Moving on, so we're also proud that it's being used for academic purposes. We are academicians, and definitely happy to see that you are doing a lot. So I made a word cloud out of claims of data users. So data users, when you get the data, you should say, or rather optional, I believe, what exactly you want to do. And I put them into this word cloud, and you see that migration comes and labor remittance, like top most intended areas of research. And it's definitely visible in conferences, like a conference, when we have always labor discussed, or migration always discussed, those this time at macro and micro levels. So yeah, there are new countries adding up, like 27 countries so far. Definitely there are top countries: Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, USA, Germany. Slowly, number of papers and other reports are growing. We counted like 20 academic articles in peer-reviewed journals, with some of them with high-ranked ratings. Yeah. So, but we also have working papers and master's theses and PhD theses. Which, so if you publish something and you think we don't know, please let us know. Send us your paper. We'll be happy to make sure that we update these numbers. These are just some from recent papers. So I saw Catherine is part of this talk, and we worked on gender earnings inequality, published in Comparative Economic Studies. We have many other colleagues doing interesting stuff, looking alcohol consumption, for example. Charles Becker and Susan Steiner and other colleagues looking at bride kidnapping for this several papers so far. It's always lively discussion when these papers are presented. One of them published in Demography journal. Okay, I think this is all about what I want to say about generally what's going on with the LiK study. When conference happen, kind of my mood goes up, because you see people use, people do analysis, and it seems to be it's bringing good for public. Now moving to the second part, probably most interesting, and why you came to this session, what we did in 2019. So just to say timeline, in terms of process, you already have some broad ideas how it happens in terms of consultations, talking to people, what type of topics to include. So for example, last time we thought Eurasian Economic Union, one topic big in the country, climate change seems to be another one. So these are ideas we try to think and kind of replicate, include new questions so we can have some ideas. So for example, another idea was SDGs, and with me working with Tillman on conflict and development. SDG 16 was definitely a goal which we wanted to contribute with some data bringing in. So we included a few questions which are part of SDGs and directly measure some indicators. So we started process in June, then we tendered the data. It was a long process, very much struggling with German bureaucracy because IGZ was funding big part of the costs, and in that respect, there are additional requirements from German government. And lastly, in September, we got CR, winning the tender, and given its copy, computer-based data collection, it requires substantially more time to get ready your data entry program that it works and functions and gives you what you want. So it was really something different for our team. We had to learn and we had to work with a new company. So in terms of tracking the previous households' addresses and contacts, it was a lot of preparation work that CR company did very well. Yeah. And in December, end of November, we started collecting data. Then winter was at the beginning very cold, so it delayed the data collection. So it ended up that we finished in February. So in that respect, winter is not best time to collect data. It's cold, interviewers need to travel, sometimes roads are closed, but one positive thing about data finished in February is that it's pure pre-COVID kind of baseline data. Yeah? So we finished, and then in March, everything started. So in that respect, maybe it's very instructive how households did before the COVID type of information. And data cleaning, again, a lot of learning by the data collection company and by us. So it took us quite a long time in terms of data cleaning. Whoever produces the data probably knows it's not difficult, but time-consuming type of work. And we almost finished. There are a few issues to address, but we had help from our colleagues, from UCA definitely, from IGZ, and from University of Gießen. So thank you very much for all this help. Now, what changes we did? So definitely new company, new challenges, a lot of telling what is what. Shift from paper-based to copy. So again, you learn it's not probably at the end very difficult, but still a lot of work. Introduction of use questionnaire, as I told, and use questionnaire having more or less mirroring the individual level, adult level questionnaire, but also some type of specific information colleagues at University of Central Asia wanted. So you have this list here. Just to broadly explain what we changed in each type of house questionnaire, but also I'm going to show tables over time, which type of topics retained, which are changed, etc. So in household, we given IGZ is a research institute looking at food and food security. We included food insecurity perceptions, climate change as a new section. Shocks, very demanded topic, so we expanded. So we usually in the past asked whether they had shock. So it was not clear how big that shock is, yeah, how much expenses they had to do to overcome that shock. So we ask now monetary type of damage and expense they had to do. With festivities, collecting it like already 3 times, we thought maybe it's enough at the time. We can introduce it later time, but that's something that was removed to bring new modules. That individual questionnaire risk aversion was something coming out again and again is important in our econometric analysis. So we thought maybe we should ask more areas about risk. So not only general risk type of. Disability status is very important for SDG, so that's why it's here. Discrimination is a part of SDG 16 again, so that's why it's here. Bribing, we included already in last wave, but also kept it. So marriage practices, given our colleagues work on bride kidnapping, kept, but a little bit shortened with their consultation. So identity values were because we looked at some point on social cohesion as a topic. So these are also important components of that topic. So we had to drop, unfortunately, to bring something else. So agriculture questionnaires included new section on farm investment, but we revised the whole questionnaire by removing the second or first agricultural season. In some tropical countries, definitely it makes sense, but in Kyrgyz case, it's very few crops that kind of have 2 seasons, but largely people consider spring, summer, autumn time as 1 season altogether. No change in community questionnaire. So I hope it's visible to you, but it kind of shows evolution of topics and modules over time. So in household, we, for example, introduced child anthropometry and breastfeeding in 2016 and 19. Childcare was once asked about in 2013. So as you see, in certain waves, we have some topical focus, and that's the reason some modules are expanded and some interesting topics are introduced. So housing, assets, land, but with introduction of agricultural module, definitely land became part of the agricultural module. So we had in the first 4 waves, module called agricultural markets, but then we moved it to this agricultural questionnaire. So consumption expenditure, so-called core areas, but as I said, expenses on festivities are now not a part of 2019. Income sources were usually 1 module, but then we divided into transfers and labor income. Migration remains. Shocks expanded, and as I said, climate change, more or less perceptions, is a part of the household questionnaire now. Moving on, individual questionnaire. It's a big part of our questions probably. So we ask about happiness. So for example, subjective well-being is a core module. Yeah. So we want to see how happy people are in respect of other changes happening with them. So education, health, so healthy lifestyle and nutrition, more or less food insecurity is here. Personality was once, but we removed it, hoping that personalities do not change very quickly over 1 year. So you can keep using data from 2013 to control for that. So risk aversion a bit expanded, employment core module, we keep it, and family and households is something we keep changing. We had time use at some point, women background and fertility. Gender attitudes definitely want to keep it, and etc. We had for a while section called worries, but somehow it didn't help us in any econometric analysis. So we thought maybe we are not measuring what we want. In 2016 wave, we had a whole module on aspirations. So it's a very interesting topic, which our IFPRI colleagues had a look. Then we have security and violence, given Tilman and me look at conflict and development. So security, violence, discrimination, all this stuff, but also Kyrgyzstan, given the South events in 2010, definitely relevant in that respect. And social life is where you look at social networks and trust and political participation. It's where more or less like subjective type of information comes. So yeah, you see probably what happened, what you can do. You already may be thinking using some type of information, but here we are. So agricultural questionnaire looks at farmland and its use, and definitely livestock, agricultural information. So it's more or less the same in 2 years since its introduction, but last year we also included farm investments, which we found very few do it. So it's my concluding slide. I hope I'm not talking too much, probably I do. So LiK data producers, so the rule of sharing data, probably the main question you want to ask, that after data is ready for analysis, we kind of have embargo period for about 12 months. We didn't follow that rule in last time because of many reasons. And as a researchers, we have to do many other projects. So it was really kind of using time of other projects to do this project. Yeah? So in that respect, talking to our bosses in terms of more or less better support. Probably the one topic to be discussed. So what I want to say is that probably data will be likely posted for public is end of next year. So definitely sustainability funding is something we keep all time in mind. So we've been working on long-term proposal to collect more waves, but it's on the way. So it's there are several kind of developments going on, which still in that this process of proposal is in process yet. That's mainly it. I hope it was useful. So we have study website called Life in Kyrgyzstan. We have data depository and we have Twitter. So we don't tweet too often. It looks like more like a conference tweet account, but we try to entertain you sometime with providing some charts. And I wish we do more, but it's what we can at the moment. With that, I'd like to thank you and stop sharing my screen and be ready to answer your possible questions. So just, I don't know, raise your hand or just start talking. So I think I'm playing both speakers and moderators role, and if there are questions, we'll be happy to answer.
Can I ask?
Hi, Elita. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I had the question. I don't remember in which of the waves, but I think in one of the waves there was a question on the language of instruction in secondary school, and then it disappeared in other waves. Is it continued in 2019, or it's? I don't know. You don't remember.
I think, yeah, one way to look at questionnaires, but language, I think we worked with you, Alisher, last time at least to retain those questions, to see in what extent language matters in labor markets. So I think we usually do not drop because it seems to quite important information, right? So it could be that it moved from household level to individual level, but I'm not entirely sure, yeah, so.
From what I remember, it's the language of instruction in university was remained everywhere, but in high school or secondary school, it disappeared at some point.
Okay. I don't know. Okay. Difficult to remember all the 6 waves, yes. what decisions we made and why we made. And if you look at what happens, and probably it's still possible to do something.
And by the way, for the data, you said it will be available end of 2021, but the questionnaires, will it be posted earlier?
Yes, that's something I want to also mention. I mean, definitely while we collected data and adjusted the questionnaire to the copy version, which also brings some additional requirements, how you design your questionnaires. There were some changes which we know, but we need to kind of introduce. So when you get the data, you are not puzzled why this additional variable present in data while it's not in the questionnaire. So that's some adjustments which just takes time, need to be done. Yeah, I think we want to post the questionnaires in the LiK website, and I think the previous one's already there, so you can have a look and subscribe to our Twitter account. We probably only source of contact to know what's going on. We want to kind of be disciplined in terms of sending you information, but yeah, I mean, Lisa, you know, all of us are researchers doing many other projects and having a lot of deadlines, but this is what happens.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Damir, can I ask a question? It's
Sure.
Nodur.
Yes, Nadir, please go ahead.
Hi, Damir, thanks. I have a question with regards to 2019.
Yeah.
So you said you use copy system,
yes.
Yeah, for this. So it gives additional inputs which are not covered manually by respondents. For instance, the length of each module. Do you plan to integrate it into database? And then, for instance, GPS coordinates. I assume that interviews were taken place, took place at households. Yeah, so this kind of.
Yep.
Thanks.
Definitely, with copy you have much more control and more information about some parameters of the survey. Yeah? So in the past we also had time each interview took, how long. Here it's more or less recorded by the device, and definitely geocodes if it's kind of okay in terms of connection. Yeah. So in big cities, in houses, it seems to be a bit problematic in terms of signal, but in villages we see that most kind of GPS codes are in place. So it's not kind of 100%. Yeah. So that question is definitely something also related to kind of not say confidentiality, but our obligation to make sure that the households are protected. Yeah. So if we provide to users exact GPS codes which show the roof of the house, then it's clear for the user where these households are. And in that respect, we are definitely a bit shy with sharing exact coordinates. I think there are ways to make sure there is some noise introduced in the GPS code so that it's not directly showing the roofs, but nearby areas. But in terms of like altitude and climatic conditions, information you're interested most, it's what will be provided. We can provide a central point of the population point. It's also another consideration. So we didn't make our minds how we share the data with you, but be sure that the 2019 data will have kind of geocodes which you will hopefully satisfy your needs, gives you a key to connect with other sources of data, the LiK data.
Thank you.
Hello, Damir, can I ask a question?
Sure, please go.
First of all, thanks a lot for the insightful presentation. I had a question regarding the aspirations part. It was just introduced in 2016, but dropped. I was wondering if you have any particular reason for not continuing with this part. Thank you.
I think the general idea that we want to make sure that respondents have more or less tolerable amount of time spending and providing information. So already it's a lot, yeah. So we probably spent in average more than 1 hour. I mean, tolerance rate probably we were told about 45 minutes. So in that respect, we had to make some compromises, yeah. So aspirations were part of the research interest from colleagues at IFPRI, and it's definitely amazing set of questions, and in that respect definitely probably changes, especially for young people, but it also has a lot to do with intergenerational, like family level of aspirations. So in that respect, I think things may be still relevant for later waves. But yeah, I think it was very long, and given we couldn't like remove our core modules, it was one of the candidates we had to remove. Yeah, so think about yourself as a respondent who is responding 1.5 hours, and by end of the interview you just tired, you just angry. And what happens that they realize that if they say no to initial question like, do you have land? Yeah, it's an important kind of filtering question which leads to more questions about land. So then they realize if I say no, then there are no questions anymore. Yeah. So in that respect, we don't want that. Yeah. So we want to devote enough time that people are fresh and like happy to provide information. So that's the main reason. Yeah. So asking people 3 hours and I think that data quality will be.
I see. So it's only for the time saving purposes, not for subject specific.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would say so.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Can I?
So go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Damir, for the overall presentation and for this data. I love it, just data, and it like helps me a lot, and I think a lot of researchers use this. And I have a question about social desirability bias, because in every survey there is like bias of social desirability, and I want to ask in which section of the questions you deal with that a lot. Thank you.
So two thoughts about social desirability bias. I assume most people know that people want to be nice, yeah, to each other. When we see each other first time, we show best of ours and try to be responding positively and probably responding a bit more enthusiastically than we would do in normal circumstances. So I think it's definitely present, especially in Central Asian context, when kind of being nice to guests and openness is something specific, which we are proud of. But another thought is with the panel, yeah, these are the same people. We keep going to them and asking the same type of questions. Over time, they realize it's normal people who, I mean, interviewers usually also given if data collected in Naren Oblast, the same group used to come to the same households. And in that respect, there is probably a potential that this social desirability bias will be declined. There is maybe more trust to the normality. So in that respect, I would say that that have a potential to be reduced, but I cannot be entirely sure. But when we looked at few few cases when, for example, happiness is one question we ask and people say, yeah, I'm moderately happy, yeah, from 0 to 10, most people say 7, 8. And for example, one case was that a person lost his job, and we looked at how it reflects his happiness level, and it was 7, 8 before, then went down to 2. So in that respect, we thought, okay, people seem to be reacting and showing what they feel. So in that respect, there are some indications that people reflect more or less what they feel. Trust, another example where we have a lot of kind of answers around 4, meaning around 3 point something. So we ask like, do you trust the government? And the response categories are like, do not trust at all, trust, do not trust, and then somewhat trust and fully trust. So most people choose category answer number 3, trust somewhat, and it's not really clear what it takes to move person from somewhat trust to trust fully. So, I mean, sometimes maybe having more answer options is an answer, but I don't know, given all the surveys provide few response items, you want to be data be comparable to other sources of data as well and keep the same answer categories. So that was problematic, for example, in researching a topic on like social cohesion. It's very difficult to move here. So I mean, people usually say they trust some level, but then if you have an intervention that should improve trust, then it's kind of difficult to imagine that people fully now trusting government. Probably even they trust more, it's still at the level of somewhat trust.
Thank you.
Yeah, good morning everyone again. Good afternoon in Kyrgyzstan. I'm Elita, PhD from the University of Bamberg. So I was involved now in the last years on surveying in Caucasus and Central Asia. And what we missed is to design our survey this country a lot of information that you're giving right now, to us. So in terms of survey methodology, surveying in Kyrgyzstan, and yeah. So do you think you could somehow do a paper or report on surveying, on survey methodology based on the survey experience you have had right now?
Thanks, Elisa. Definitely, it's a big part of what we do. Typical surveys provide you with code books and field report and everything that kind of gives you very detailed at variable level information to work with the data. As I said, it's a research-based, academic-based project, and it was funded related to some research work. And in that respect, at the end, it always project ended, and either you use your time to do a service to data users by using time from other projects, or you provide minimum information. Yeah, so far we've been very modest in terms of supporting data users, just providing questionnaires, and practically it helps that variable names more or less fit to what is in questionnaire. So in that respect, you can work, but with the long-term funding idea, definitely we thought to be more professional in that respect. Start with good food, meaning use a proper platform that generates this type of support information documentation from the beginning. So given its copies, and there are certain processes that leads to just very smooth generation of documentation as we understood. And that was part of the whole idea that if you want to continue this, probably needs to be continued, then we probably need to have more resources and devote proper time and provide proper documentation. So yeah, bear with us so far. I mean, we are trying probably our best, but that's what you have. Okay, thank you, Golib. If I may introduce you, but you also can tell a little bit more about yourself. Golib Sanaev, our second speaker, is a researcher at IAMO in Halle in Germany, and we started working on Kyrgyz data recently, discussing more, but definitely IAMO is an institution that was present in the region, presenting a lot of interesting research, mostly related around agriculture. And Golib is going to present how LiK data can be merged with geographically based climate data. Yeah, floor is yours, Golib. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Damir, for the very interesting presentation. First of all, I would like to briefly introduce myself. I'm doing my postdoc at the Department of Agricultural Policy, and my main research interests are about household models, and particularly I'm doing agriculture commercialization and its possible impacts on several outcomes. Yeah, and let me share my experience with working LiK data set. If I may, maybe I will start switching to my presentation. Okay, then let me begin. First of all, I would like to remind you that I'm not from the climate change or other disciplines. I'm mostly doing my research on agriculture economics. Nevertheless, I found that these interdisciplinary approaches are very needed in these days. And that's why I come up with this challenge of climate change indicators for my research question. And while I was doing my research, I used agricultural markets, section 3 of LiK dataset, which includes production and trade activities. And I was using waves of 2012, 2013 years. And I found very interesting patterns where production and trade of these commodities were very much fluctuating over years, over 2 years. And I also found consistency in the official statistics, and I was interested what might be the case, what might be the reason of these fluctuations of production volumes of each commodities. And I decided to include some variables which could explain these phenomena. And fortunately, LiK dataset has a section, I think seven section, which includes shocks, and there are 28 types of shocks, which can more or less explain these variations in terms, including climate change and so on. Nevertheless, I was suggested by my colleagues and Atabek Umirbekov, who is working at IAMO, that there is a possibility of inclusion of these climate change variables exogenously. That's why I come up with this challenge, and let me briefly start how it works and how I compile all these variables into LiK dataset. So basically, I found on the internet and also in the community of climate change scholars that there are basically two sources of climate data, which is Climate Research Unit of University of East Anglia, and the second one is so-called MERA, which stands for Modern Era Retrospective Analysis for Research and Applications, version 2, which is initiated by NASA. And I tried to include both sources for the integration of these variables into LiK dataset. I will try to first explain steps to generate CRU data, climate data, and then I will switch to steps to generate MERA2 climate dataset. So let us begin. These are the steps that are needed to generate CRU climate data. First of all, you need to install Google Earth, and then you should add placemakers, clusters on map of Kyrgyzstan. And I think it would be better if I just briefly show it on an interactive base. So maybe some of you are familiar with Google Earth. And then you can see our beautiful Earth. And let me briefly show how the coding is launched. This is a coding system or data set, fragment of data set of household surveys and community survey, and which includes SOATE, which is stands for State Classifier of the Designation System for Objects of Administrative Units in Kyrgyzstan. And these codes are very important since they include, they are unique for each cluster. And then I use this classificator where, for example, I found this Karakul, rural urban area, which belongs to Istanbul. And coding is like this. So 201 stands for the number of clusters. And let us switch to Google Earth. So since it is Karakul, let me type Karakul. So fortunately, Google Earth has most of these points integrated already. In my experience, I found like 90% of these points were already integrated in the Google Earth. However, for remaining 10% of clusters or community points, I had to search for the internet and so other sources to make it clear where this or that cluster is situated. So let us see. Now we found Karakul, which is in the Isikul region, and then what we need to do is just to point this new place mark, and then I type likewise Karakul. This is the coding which is very necessary for further type of coding. And then you can find that it disappeared now here on the left side of this platform. And now let me switch to the presentation. Yes, here you can see that I already put marks for all these places which is included in the LiK dataset. So you can see these many dots which represent the places where LiK dataset was conducted. And then, yes, then you need to download this so-called plugin to your computer and then open it through Google Earth software, which includes data on temperature and precipitation. Let me briefly show how it works. So what you need is you need to go to this website, which I launched here, so to make it like interactive. So here, this is the address of the CRU dataset, and then suppose you install a Google Earth, and then you need to copy these grid boxes, KML extension, which can be opened from Google Earth. And let me show it how it works. And then you come here and then open this grid box. And then you can see that whole Earth is now with these gridded lines. And if we come up to this place which is Karakul Isikul, you can see here, this is the place, and then you should push the button, and then it shows this special message, which is show half degree cells for this block. And then you can see that these grids became even smaller than the previous ones. Now again, Karakul Isikul belongs to this spatial grid, and to have some impression how the distance of these grids, let me measure, and then it shows that it's about 40 kilometers. And also this side, I think, yeah, this side should be around around 50 kilometers or so on. So now you can see how it works, and yes. Yes, these are the last versions that I found so far, but you can check sometime they update these files. And then, yes, one more thing. After you find Karakul, for example, you see this grid box, and then what you need to do is just to click the button, mouse, and then there are 4 indicators. For example, in my case, based on my research question, I chose temperature and precipitation data. And then when you click this data, you find that data of temperature starting from 1901 to 2019, I think, yes. And then it took me for a while to copy all these data sets into Excel, and then later on integrate into LiK dataset. Yes, that is the basic steps that I wanted to show you, how to copy and data from CRU planning. And then the next thing is yes, The next thing is how it appears on Excel file. So you can see the central latitude and longitude of each cluster. And then this is a fragment of my do file where I reshaped my data set so for the better, like from wide to long format. And this is basically how it looks like in the data set of data. And then let me switch now to the second part of my presentation, which is, as I mentioned already, comes from NASA, and it is more, I would say, modern tool. But however, I'm not that much kind of using this one at the moment, but nevertheless, let me just go on. What you need to do is, again, you need, since let me show you. Since I already downloaded all these data sets, sorry, yes. I see, yeah, let me show here. I think it's somewhere else, but okay. These files, which you already saw, which I did, should be saved in the spatial format, which is KML format, and then later on you can open it from Excel. And this is an extraction from Google Earth, where you can see the exact location of each cluster, including like longitude and latitude data for each cluster. So then what you need to do is just go to this website and then paste this latitude and longitude data set for each cluster, and then you can choose other like options, but in my case I chose agri-climatology, and I needed interannual data set, and then I needed CSV format. Then yes, then you can download CSV file to your computer for that particular cluster, which looks like in this way. For example, here you can see that it starts from 1981 until the present days, and these are the months, and then this is for, I think, Istiklal, yeah, Istiklal Karakul. And let me try to make it like here. Yes, yes, here you should go to this place, and then here you can choose other options. But honestly, it was enough for me to use this agroclimatology and interannual data set. But you can as well as choose daily basis, which you can find temperature, for example, for every day. And here the other indicators, weather indicators, since I'm not very much familiar with these all other indicators, in my case, I used meteorology, temperature range at 2 meters, and meteorology precipitation. But others can use other indicators, I guess. Yeah, that's the basic my findings, and let me just briefly show. Yes, and this is how data looks like in the data file. It's like another file, so to say, which you can easily merge with the existing LiK data set. The key variable here is SOATE, which can be used for integration of cluster. And then I put this new variable where you can compare, maybe based on your research questions, CRU data, or maybe like MERA2 data set. The one thing is here to mention is that I did it by myself, and I already shared with Damir, and hopefully we will get this how to say, results that these points that I highlight here are valid, and these points that I chose are real points. But I hope that these are not like there are not much differences from official statistics. Yeah. Thank you very much for your attention. This was a brief findings. Yeah. Ready to any questions?
Thank you, Golib. We had a longer session to understand what Golib was doing. It was very interesting. I think definitely so many research looking at effect of shocks. That is something, one example when you can use third-party data, bring precipitation, temperature, but yeah, a lot of learning, I guess, in terms of moving and merging data, but looks like a lot of promising avenues in doing this type of work. I open the floor to questions. If there are questions, please just tell, present yourself. Catherine, very glad to hear. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Ms. Catherine Anderson in the United States. It's really early in the morning here. This last part is really interesting, and I'm just starting to learn how to use GIS coding here. But I'm not sure what are you including? I mean, part of this is private stuff that you're doing for your own research. What is actually going to be in the LiK that's available for users? Latitude and longitude, the temperature at what point in time, weather, is it just for the survey day? What is available, and what do we have to add on our own?
Thank you very much, Catherine, for your question. I suppose it depends on individual research question, but again, in my case, since I was using agricultural markets and the production volumes and salt volumes, I needed this kind of variable which could somehow show these fluctuations. And this is a raw data, so to say. You just copy it from Google Earth, and of course there is. I mean, I believe that the researchers who are working in CCRU unit, they are aware. Maybe they are kind of responsible for the accuracy of this temperature and precipitation, which I used. But nevertheless, what I did, particularly in my research, I used this data set, and then yes, I converted this temperature and precipitation to the other variables which can be used as a shocks and temperature shocks, which needs special methodology. And then maybe briefly I will try to just show how I did it. If you can see, this is the codes that I used from this already downloaded temperature data. For example, here, my main variables that I'm including into my regression model is these temperature differences, which how to say, measures changes not only between 2 years, but in the long run. So starting from 1981. And so if there is this change or difference is big enough, it can somehow show that some shocks happened in that or this year. That's why I already included this variable into my regression models, and it is observing these fluctuations of production volume. But related to your question, that direct question about using this data, I think I already shared it with Damir, and after Damir and other team members will confirm, it can be, I mean, used in other, included into LiK data set. Yes.
Yeah, that's one item I thought we can discuss maybe later in terms of sharing some syntax file, additional data we kind of useful. So definitely every one of us start from zero and we do go the same path. So, I mean, there should be ways to help to each other in a way that you can kind of quicker do what you need to do if it's very typical type of aggregation or whatever. Think about like consumption aggregate, yeah. So we all need to do that to see what's the economic level of households. So that could be type of kind of shareable information we can have. I don't know, kind of community of data users that can help each other share, get feedback, etc. So could be a discussion of later.
I had a question. Here's Elisa Mandieva, so maybe if hi again. Sorry, before my baby was sleeping, I couldn't really speak much. So yeah, so I would just to say that life in Kyrgyzstan, I mean, data is unique in a way that's a panel data, you know, in the region. This is, and as Golib, it's great work what you're doing, because this is actually, for now, I was also seeing mostly level studies, and what you're doing actually multi-level, so micro, with bringing the macro level data. And it's great that you're also staying in Halle, because I'm now in Berlin, and I was trying actually to do similar thing, but not with the macro data from, you know, weather and so on, but with World Bank data. So I'm trying now, you know, working with Life and Transition Survey within my PhD, and I'm trying to bring, you know, macro data from World Bank, so in terms of GDP and so on. So this is actually what we could do also with Life in Kyrgyzstan survey. You know, this would give us amazing research ideas or results, how actually Kyrgyzstan, you know, and the macro level, the effects, you know. And in this regard, do you already have such research? Or any one of you, Damir, your experiences? That would be very interesting. So for me, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Elisa, for your question. And yeah, indeed, I think that this is one way of how you can integrate external data to LiK data set. And with climate data set, what was good is that I could find temperature and precipitation in a cluster level, which gives you some variation in the whole data set. So as Damir already mentioned, I think there were 120 communities or clusters. So for each clusters now you can find like spatial like temperature and precipitation data set. Yes, and I of course did, apart from this climate data, I also integrated producer prices, which I needed for my research, but unfortunately it was not on a community base, but only on oblast level. Nevertheless, it worked out for me, and then there was a variation for these 7 oblasts which are in Kyrgyzstan. And I think you mentioned about World Bank data, but if let it be World Bank data or other piece of data which you want to integrate into LiK dataset, what you should consider is whether it is possible to integrate those external datasets in cluster level, or at least in oblast level. In that case, it might make some sense. Otherwise, for example, GDP per capita in Kyrgyzstan is just one data which can be, it make no sense to integrate and so on. Yeah, thank you for an interesting question. And,
thank you, Elisa. Just to maybe echo a little bit that there is not much besides what Golib and other colleagues are doing with climate data. One thing I mentioned a little bit, but we also try to make sure that LiK data look relevant, adequate. So with Catherine, for example, we also looked at dynamics and levels using KHS data, which provides much more detailed information on consumption, for example, of households. and that was kind of looking okay, meaning if to look at the both sources of data and seeing what the dynamics and levels are, seems to be quite consistent, which we were happy to see. But otherwise, there is a lot of potential probably merging with administrative data. Definitely there will be more opportunities given government, every new government seems to be talking about digital government. So must be that at some point, some data kind of merging should be available at that level. Vladimir, you raised your hand if you want to turn on your mic and ask your question, please. Please tell who you are and ask your question, please.
Hi, my name is Vladimir Trashenko. I am a senior researcher at Center of International Development and Environmental Research, Kyrgyzstan University. I would like to thank Damir for organizing this conference. It's quite interesting. And I would like to thank for Golib for this interesting presentation. Since I'm working on the climate data, I have particular questions. I will just outline some of them. The rest maybe I will ask personally by email, Golib. So you presented two data sets of the climate data. One is the CRU, another MERA 2. So the MERA, as you show, restricted by the year of 1981. It's your personal restriction or it's data restriction? This is the first question. And the second question will be, if you were analyzing these two data sets, which one you will be taking for your analysis and why? I mean, the main advantages of selecting this particular data sets. And another question will be, it was a very, very fast presentation. I hope video will be available. And then I will just, well, my question is that where can I find this video? Maybe you can send some link. So then I will properly formalize the question and ask the Golib. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vladimir, for your interesting questions. And yes, indeed, these data sets, I mean, these two sources that I was using are very interesting cases. And papers that I was following, I would call them like papers which studies shocks, temperature shocks, and relates it with consumption, with production, and so on. These papers, this group of papers usually try to use both of these data sets and compare their findings, and more or less, I would say that the findings from these two data sources are more or less consistent with each other. And concerning to MERA2 dataset, it starts, and data restriction is programmed by this source by itself, that it starts from 1981. Maybe it's valid for Kyrgyzstan. Maybe in other countries you can, if you look for, you can find earlier dates. And in my case, I was using CRU dataset because I don't know to what reason, but it fits my expectation, and the findings from CRU dataset was more or less explaining these fluctuations. And then, yeah, concerning to this, any other questions that you might be interested in, I'm always ready to reply by email, and just, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Vladimir, to make sure that your questions are answered, so presentation will be posted at the conference website with the videos. That's also an intention to post it. We just need to take time to clean the records. I mean, there will be some places which are not very informative, so just ask our communication and IT colleagues to help, and then one definite avenue at the University of Central Asia's YouTube channel, I believe, exists already, but also at ISDCs. Yeah. So given we are all moving now to online, many things are to learn. So the fact that we are conducting this conference online was also something to be stressed about at the beginning, but hopefully it went okay.
Thank you, Damir.
Okay, looks like no more questions. Shall we then try to, given about half an hour left, I also would like to get your feedback on some questions from us to you, not only the other way. Maybe we can try to now move to the last, more or less, talking part. Golib, many thanks. Definitely in such a short time, difficult to present what's done and how, but definitely people have understanding how the process goes, what are the sources of data and how you did it, the whole process. Many thanks for presenting it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Just to start discussion, maybe I can post some points to start with. Largely, you can talk about anything related to LiK, say experiences, data, some clarifying questions. But there are two items I'd like to announce first and get your feedback, but there is no kind of sequence of discussion. So just a moment, let me try to open this. You can see it, yeah? So yeah, I mean, my idea was that you can ask any data and questionnaire questions, data documentation. We already had some discussions, but something that was after Golib's presentation was like sharing some knowledge, some syntax files, maybe even some data that others have to do. So yeah, I mean, any experience, feedback, suggestions are welcomed. But one particular question we keep asking ourselves, given that we want to continue like a conference every year, it's becoming a mix of many things. So we started more or less as a academic conference, but in pure sense, you would expect substantial comments, a discussant assigned to a speaker with paper more or less ready. Yeah? So that was would be something that newcomers, first time presenting people may expect, but not getting it. From the other side, when we present like to an academic audience, some people complain they don't understand and what the message is. So in that respect, one thought maybe we should think about dividing more or less, not strictly, but maybe one day could be purely kind of academic approach. People read and papers are ready, at least advanced, and there is discussant, and we can just discuss maybe technicalities and a lot of methods and etc. While another day could be, call it policy or development, where projects, some more or less applicable stuff could be presented. So that is one idea, kind of implicitly coming to that. That's one idea which would be great to have your feedback. Another idea we thought to maybe to start like a seminar series. It's again related to the first point because we usually restrict it with time. People want to get feedback, and there are a couple of questions which are not really giving you much kind of substance to improve your paper, for example. So the idea was maybe to have once a month, something like today, 1 hour, maybe less, to ask someone who is working on a LiK data, but not necessarily, but more or less Central Asia, Kyrgyzstan, to have this discussion. Yeah. So say you are very advanced with your paper, you want to present, there are some issues to discuss, just come together, we discuss, we assign someone to read and comment as a discussant, and then we have kind of help each other as well as to learn. So that's a couple of concrete ideas, but also if you have now any questions on data, on process, please unmute your microphone and feel free to ask. Thank you.
Damir, may I ask? Nodir,
yes,
again.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Nodir. Go ahead.
Right, here I am again. So just, I think to make the data more usable and kind of attractive, I think also possibility to integrate with common variables with other household data sets. It would be interesting to have something like merged syntax for merging different modules. Yeah, and something like documentation of these problems which might person experience. Yeah, I mean, it's good that you provide this overview over the years, which models exist, but it also takes some efforts in terms of syntax. I know that there is syntax is shared hand by hand from different researchers, but there is no, I don't know, that would make it also more attractive if you have the syntax already available with the data, to download from ITSA, for instance.
Yeah, that definitely would be something that proper data survey project would provide. If you look at like mix UNICEF data or DHS data, definitely there are already prepared calculated indicators that you can directly use. I think mix provides like child level data, women level data, household level. So you kind of can start right away without worrying too much about some indicators properly calculated. Yeah, I mean, it's again something we started, and definitely our first users are ourselves, and we understand because we know what's behind. But yeah, I agree, it would be great. And the whole idea of applying for long-term funding was to make sure that this LiK study is proper in terms of providing documentation already prepared, kind of files, data files that you can use right away. Currently, definitely difficult to start with, and especially when you start compiling panel setting, it's a lot of confusion. Sometimes I'm confused. So yeah, I agree, but that's what we have now, and yeah, I cannot promise anything, but that's we fully understand your thoughts and suggestions.
Damir, I would like to add here some points about data codes, and to my knowledge that like a data set, I mean questionnaires, they have already one file like guidelines, I think, and then it's in the like 2010 where you can find where one can find how this code book was used. For example, for fresh users, it might be also very useful in terms of like merging data set. I found it like it's called code book LiK 10, 11, and then in the last pages you can find the codes how to merge one or two data sets and how to append some files, some waves, and so on. It's also maybe can be a good starting point for new users.
Yeah, for those waves, it was definitely Susan's contribution. She was largely running this project at that stage, so it's probably my fault after that I didn't produce those documentation. But yeah, we've been also quite busy with many other projects. Yeah, I mean, with 2019 and 16 probably could be produced. Especially this, we call it mega roster, the file which you use to link individuals across waves. It's been quite difficult to do that, meaning the data company and many companies, survey companies, collect data once and they are not very, don't have experience making sure to tracking and making sure that the same person has is consistently coded correctly across time has been a challenge. But which means a lot of work from our side, and it's been not perfect, definitely, I agree. That providing a little bit more would be helping you as well.
Damir, this is Elisa. I had one comment that to the conversation we are having right now, maybe, and then after to formats. So in regard to pulling all the people together who are working on Kyrgyzstan on surveys, or that would be great if we, as you said, once a month, maybe in the the series, maybe to as you said, we are all working on different projects and so on. Maybe every 3 months would be perfect. I think then someone will have the paper and present. Still, we can discuss, but also within this series, what we could do is share with our do files. I mean, in any way, we present our survey methodology or general research methodology, and within this, we can also, as Golib showed today, so we show in our do files, we document everything what we are doing. So what we could do, share this do files with you, or someone who will put all together maybe, and then when it's needed, the people can ask you, or it can also put online. I don't know how is the if everyone will be okay with it. So that might help maybe for you to document, or help for you to document everything what's going on with the LiK data and so on. So for example, this year I won't finish, but next year we are finishing our paper that we presented last year in a LiK conference. It's about transition from education to work of youth in Kyrgyzstan between 18 and 34 age. So we are actually pulling all the waves, actually all the people with this age, and then merging this, doing this panel data. So what we can share this do file, for example, and then you can see, or you can also share with others. So that might help other groups. And in regard to format of the conference, so at the end we are all doing more or less econometricians, and has to do not only in our research, but also somehow we need to be connected, to real world, as in a way that, public policy and so on. And I think that's what you're bringing together, the researchers and practitioners. And in this regard, I mean, for me as a young researcher, it helps me also to see in which, other sectors people are interested in the research we are doing. One thing is you do research and you publish papers, it's very nice and so on, but still it makes interesting also to see how it could be, used for public policy making and so on. So I see it the right format. At least I had it last year, this impression. So, and I would like to thank you for this platform. And as I said before, the LiK is indeed unique platform and unique data. So, and I really hope that we will be, going every year together, gathering and promoting this data. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa, for reflection. Yeah, I agree that when we gather in Bishkek, it's really like a festivity in terms of seeing old friends and getting to know new and bringing different circles. So that's really a lot of vibe, how to say. So yeah, I mean, these seminars are trying to, the idea once a month or maybe less, to give them more space, more kind of time and attention to the researchers, especially young researchers who may benefit from feedback and then just progress with their research. Yeah, I think there is also a responsibility for helping and making sure there is a stream of young researchers coming into, say, into business. Thank you. In terms of sharing, I think I'm not that no experience from my side. Yeah? So the idea was maybe that it's very common now for most journals to ask for postings your do files so people can replicate your results. So that's one way to go. But also our idea was more or less just to start from working with the data, accelerate your work, make sure what you do is more or less consistent with others done. That would be one approach, but I don't know how exactly to do. I think if you share some your intellectual property, maybe supporting it with some description and suggesting some citation would be a fair way for your contribution to community, so that people can cite that particular document and then you get the credit for it. Yeah, so that not that you share it and then you don't know how many people used and etc. So yeah, I mean, if you come up with some good suggestions how other studies do, definitely there are many other studies, Russian longitudinal surveys and understanding society, young lives. So it would be great to know what experience they have, what can we learn, and try to do useful thing, yeah, among each other.
Damir, just building on that, if you look at the Stata users, Stata has a site at Boston College that is a collection of programs written by Stata users that cover procedures that are not directly in Stata. I mean, you could think of the long run doing something like that, and most of those programs are described in issues of the Stata Journal previous years. I mean, I know now we have the Silk Road Journal. You could see having short papers, something in the Silk Road Journal that would discuss the methodology that you have programmed, or something. For example, we know that in the LiK there are a lot of variables in which you collect the main data in the early waves, but then you have to pull it forward. It would be very helpful to, I mean, I've written programs to do that. They're probably really inefficient because I'm an old person, but get somebody young to really make an efficient working program. This would be something that would be really useful for people. And you could maybe publish a short paper about it in something like the Silk Road Journal and then put it in a repository. You'd have to have some place to collect it, but I think like UCA would be able to help with that. But I use Stata as a model for.
Yeah, agree. Stata comes to mind right away with all this data, user-generated commands, which are really useful sometimes. Saves you days, if not weeks of work.
Yeah. I mean, you could use your seminar series too that you're talking about, which I think is a very good idea, but probably once a month is a bit excessive. But to promote things that you're doing that might be useful in the public domain for users of LiK or other.
Yeah, I mean, in that respect, definitely would be good to know who is working currently with the data and then draw on that resource. Yeah? So I mean, if they are ready to prepare and present, then that's one idea. Then share technical parts. So in a way, just to make sure that we communicate, we know who's doing what, help each other, hopefully do good research. But sometimes, I mean, for example, with geocodes that Golib presented was definitely generated manually. So we had population point codes, we found them in Google Maps, we coded them. So this is how we generated the codes in the past, yeah? So this is what Golib presented. But there are many kind of very time-intensive type of tasks that sometimes we need help. So can be easily done by, say, research assistant. So if there are people who have enthusiastic research students who are interested in helping us with their time, that would be appreciated to kind of generate public good and then use it for general public community purpose. Yeah. So, for example, translation of materials also important. And when we talk about policy impact of our research, by publishing in a English journal doesn't help to government of Kyrgyzstan to learn what is what. So sometime maybe I thought at least making sure that people can read in the language they're comfortable with is also one idea to think in terms of outreach. That would be useful in my view.
Sorry, Damir, it's Adina again from University of Central Asia.
Yeah.
You mentioned about the seminar series could be possibly, organized not only once a year, but more, which could help, I think, junior researchers in the Central Asian studies in general. I was wondering if that series could include a component of organizing short seminar, not kind of workshop series like the one that you organized, for example, in general, like how to publish in peer-reviewed journals, how to get published in this kind of journals, or how to conduct in a certain type of research, for example, would be useful for junior researchers in general. I was wondering this could be one option to include if that seminar series would happen in the future.
Yeah, I think that's possible, definitely. But definitely we also need to get signals, yeah? So I need to tell to Tilman, my boss, that I'm doing this for public good, for young researchers, which I would be happy to do. And we have many seasoned researchers. I think Catherine is one example of dedication to the region, to the research, and helping to many. I was a happy receiver of your help for years. So that definitely possible, but I think maybe we should kind of plan, yeah, this type of things. Kind of know how many people are interested and exactly we want to make sure that it's effective, it's useful, everything possible, but it's we need signals, yeah. I mean, don't be shy to contacting, suggesting, and be initiative as well. I mean, you can organize something, yeah. And it's not that you say and we do, but it's you say, you suggest, and you suggest your time, and then you do it. I mean, okay, I think given time is almost up, maybe we should close it. Definitely, if not coronavirus, we would be sitting in a room in Bishkek probably, and maybe looking at each other's files and think more about. So when we announced this, like a data user workshop, the idea was that it will be very kind of practical and just to help each other and provide more information. But given online, maybe it's not very possible, but hopefully you get a sense where the study is moving, what we are doing, what are the news in the last wave, and who is who, more or less, in this community of data users. Okay, with that, a little bit earlier, I would like to close the session. Thank you, Golib. Thank you, Elita, who was driving all the conference throughout all these days and before. Great job, Elita. Thank you so much. And thank you all for presenting and being with us, moderating. I think it's a great opportunity to see you back and talk a little bit and to know you are doing well. I think we know the dates of the next year conference, which will be last week of October. It will be probably announced, but if you're starting your project, your research, please consider submitting again to meet each other next year, hopefully in person, and then have another event interesting event sharing research and talking, using the data. Okay, many thanks. Be good. Have a good weekend ahead. And I'd like to also thank our interpreters for their great work. Definitely, they were very stressed when we speak very fast. Many thanks, Tatiana, Saida, and your team as well. Okay, bye till next time. And I'm going to close this session. Thank you very much.